Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Laros Media. They produce podcasts, videos, commercials, and marketing plans. Check them out at larosmedia.com. My name is Alissa Golob, and I'm here once again with my co-host Scott Hayward and yet another special guest, Albertos Polizogopoulos.
You nailed it, Alissa.
Yes.
All that practicing for the past day.
Did you see me take like a breath before I did it? I was like...
For like diving into the deep.
Now, Albertos is a lawyer who specializes in constitutional and human rights advocacy work. He is the founder of the Acacia Group, a law firm in Ottawa, Ontario. He's been involved in a number of high-profile cases, including arguing before the Supreme Court for Trinity Western and the Carter Supreme Court decision on physician-assisted suicide. He's done advocacy work on behalf of the Delta Hospice, Physicians for Life, the Christian Heritage Party, and more. Basically, Albertos, you're like the white Johnny Cochran for social conservatives. That's basically the the nickname I'm going to give you. So my first question is a pressing one. And what is the worst way someone has ever butchered your last name?
Okay, well, first of all, let me say that the white Johnny Cochran for social conservatives in Canada is probably the nicest thing anybody has ever said about me. Second, I really don't know what is the worst way my name has been butchered, because it's been butchered my whole life. In any way you can think.
Yeah, but there's not like one where it was not even close. Okay. Well, the pro-abortion activists, they like to call me the Golob, and they like to call Jonathan Van Moron. So we got that throughout most of the No to Trudeau, but that wasn't really a butchering of the name, more so than some some nicknames. So I guess just starting off here, you worked, you were a partner in a different law firm for quite a while. You decided to leave and start the Acacia Group with some of your colleagues. What prompted that decision? Why did you guys do this, and what do you think is the importance of it in Canada?
Well, it's something I'd wanted to do for a long time, and in fact, Scott and I were playing golf in August of 2019, and I kind of floated the idea under a different name of having a one-stop shop for churches and parachurch organizations. So we'd have a legal division, a strategic communications division, which we have at the Acacia Group, and then the dream at that time, and it remains to some degree, is other divisions as well, where we may have some lobbying services or some philanthropic consulting services and so on. So it's something I'd wanted to do for a long time. And I got sick in September of 2020, which prompted me to just pull the trigger on my dream. And so that's what happened. And on January 1st, 2021, the Acacia Group was started. We're now 5 lawyers and 2 strategic communications consultants, one of whom is Jonathan Van Maren, you just referenced. And the second is Peter Stocklin, who is a well-known name in conservative journalism in Canada. Now, why is it important for Canada? I don't want to, toot my own horn, but I think we're an openly Christian law firm. And we exist to serve the broader church. We have secular clients as well, but our purpose, our mission is to serve the broader church. And I think we're the only openly Christian law firm devoted to religious or Christian organizations in the country. So it makes us unique. I don't know if it makes us important, but it certainly makes us unique.
Absolutely.
Well, I think there's some really important work that you guys have done. And I know that you did when you were at your old law firm. I know that you've been an advisor to many people who are involved specifically within the pro-life movement and, of course, just Christians in general. I think one of the larger kind of cases that you were involved with, and one of the most recent cases, is with the Delta Hospice and everything that happened there over in British Columbia. I guess, making the national news and everything, one question we have for you is, could you please explain, the sort of background of what happened there regarding the provincial NDP targeting them specifically in very aggressive ways, and how the hospice was able to fight that back?
Sure. So the Delta Hospice case actually did not involve litigation with the government. It involved litigation with other members. So Delta Hospice was created about 30 years ago. It wasn't an explicitly or openly Christian organization, but it was founded by Christians and was operated with a Christian worldview. And it wasn't openly and explicitly pro-life, but again, it was operated from a pro-life perspective, because those who provide hospice care generally recognize that assisted suicide or euthanasia and hospice care simply can't coexist. And so what happened was the regional health authority in Delta made it a rule that all hospices that were not religious hospices had to offer what they called MAID, medical assistance in dying. And Delta Hospice said, no, we can't do this. And in fact, our members won't allow it. We're a private organization, we're a private charity. In BC, that's called a society. And our constitution says that our purpose and mission is to provide dignity and comfort in the final days of somebody's life. And so we can't provide dignity and comfort by ending those lives prematurely. And that kind of ended it for a bit. But then the Dying with Dignity crowd got involved, and some people infiltrated the society and started to try and change it from within. And so at some point, when it became clear that there were these people infiltrating the organization, Delta Hospice decided, well, you know what, we should change our charter and our constitution so that we're explicitly and expressly Christian and pro-life. Let's go ahead and do that. And so once they called a special meeting to do that, and that just set the whole thing on fire.
Wait, sorry, when about was this timeline-wise did this occur, this special meeting? Just for our viewers to kind of follow along there.
This was June 2020. So
Okay.
Right in the middle of COVID. And at the time, the BC government passed a resolution permitting corporations to hold AGMs virtually. And so because there were so many members of the Delta Hospice Society, doing it via Zoom just wasn't feasible. And they looked at other options. And one option was a telephone meeting where you would vote by telephone. So that's what they were going to do, because they had thousands of members at that point already. And a few people brought a petition to court to call off the meeting, because the special resolution from the government didn't permit telephone meetings. It only permitted virtual meetings. And so it went to court on a rush basis, and the judge in that petition concluded that the meeting was not called properly, and in fact went further and said it was called in bad faith. And so she canceled the meeting and put the Delta Hospice operations under court supervision. And so that meant that Delta Hospice couldn't call another meeting without approval from the court, which is kind of scary if you think about freedom of association. And the reason that the court concluded the meeting was called in bad faith is that there had been an attempt to sign up several hundred pro-euthanasia members as members of the Delta Hospice Society. And the bylaws of the society said, upon application and payment of the application fee, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't have it in front of me, and upon approval or acceptance by the board of directors, applicants shall become members, something along those lines. And so we interpreted that to mean that there's a two-step process to becoming a member. One, you have to apply, a three-step process. You got to apply, you got to pay, and you got to be approved by the board. And so when it became clear to the board that these 300 or so applicants were openly hostile towards the Delta Hospice Society and were posting on Facebook and other social media that they were applying specifically to infiltrate and change the Delta Hospice Society, they rejected them out of hand. They just rejected the applications.
Right.
So the judge in that petition concluded that we didn't have the authority to do that. The board didn't have the authority to do that. And therefore we're acting in bad faith. So we appealed that finding up to the Court of Appeal of BC. We unfortunately lost at the Court of Appeal of BC. And then that was it. But in the midst of all this litigation, while all the attention was focused on fighting with these Dying with Dignity people, the government of BC, through the Regional Health Authority, and the local one there is called the Fraser Health Authority because they're in the Fraser Valley. So the Fraser Health Authority made a declaration that because Delta Hospice would not provide MAID, they would take the lands back. So Delta Hospice was leasing land owned by the Fraser Health Authority for $1 a year, but they spent $9 million building this state-of-the-art palliative care hospital. And the Delta Hospital, the Fraser Health Authority, part of me, came in and said, well, we're canceling our agreement with you. And so you've got to give us back the lands and basically give us the building you built. And so that's what happened to Delta Hospice. So now they operate, as far as I know, they operate a counseling service for people in palliative care and their families, but they're not doing any hands-on clinical work like they were prior. So that's the Delta Hospice litigation and situation in 30 seconds or 60 seconds or however long I've gone for.
Now it was that because these pro-assisted suicide people were joining the society, it could be that anyone could join the society. And I believe that they ran a relatively successful campaign to get those that shared their views and values, those that we would call pro-life, to join the Delta Hospice Society, which is what happened. And I think at their latest AGM, it looked like that the pro-lifers and the votes that they were having were quite successful in ensuring that their charter was changed and that the right board members are on there and all that type of stuff, which I know was quite a bit of work. So even though maybe success wasn't experienced at the courts through litigation, in some ways it opened up a hole that the pro-life movement drove a big truck through for the time being.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't involved with that. I was involved in the litigation, but you're right. It showed that you could do a lot at a grassroots level that you can't necessarily do in court. And that's what the other side in this whole dispute did as well, right? They signed up people that shared their views and that were motivated to infiltrate and change the Delta Hospice Society from within. And so what it shows is the importance of having a clear constitution and clear bylaws, right? So what Delta Hospice did is it just took the template bylaws that the government of BC attached to the Societies Act, which is the corporate legislation in BC. And it showed what this does is it shows the need to actually have something customized to your needs. You can't just use templates, because then there's a crack in the wall and you can drive a truck through it.
I guess this is kind of like a good segue to one of our other questions that we have for you is what is your free legal advice? No, but what is your advice as opposed to, explicitly pro-life, generally social conservative organizations that are trying to operate, whether as a charitable organization, whether as some sort of not-for-profit entity, whether it be federally incorporated, provincially incorporated, perhaps they're dealing kind of in para-healthcare, like fully within the system or partly within the system. Maybe it's a student group on campus, which I know that you have experience with as well. I suppose, like, in all your experience over the years in helping these organizations, kind of what are some key pieces of advice that you would provide to these organizations, particularly, their executive directors and members of the board on what they should be doing in order to perhaps avoid situations like the Delta Hospice and some of the other situations that you've been involved with legally over the years?
Yeah, so I mean, the short answer to that is get proper advice from professionals. Don't try and DIY this. And I know a lot of these groups do because they're tight on budget, and so they're afraid to call a lawyer or call an accountant or whatever the case may be. Professionals are not cheap. Mm-hmm. We discount our rates for churches and charities. We believe in tithing, and we tithe our time as well. But we're still not cheap, right? Like we're competitively priced in terms of legal services across the country, which is why our practice is national. But at the same time, we're still not cheap. So I would encourage those groups and those individuals to seek proper legal advice from people with a specialty, right? I see this a lot with churches. A church will want to develop a policy on a controversial issue, and they happen to have a real estate lawyer that's part of the congregation. So they'll go see Jim Bob, real estate lawyer, for human rights advice. Mm-hmm. And this guy's probably a great lawyer and a great guy, but it's just not his expertise, right? I don't do real estate law, and you wouldn't want me doing your real estate transaction because I don't know anything about it. So I would encourage them to seek proper professional advice where appropriate and where needed. And ideally, you're not going to be dealing just with somebody who has corporate law experience or human rights experience, but it's somebody who gets your philosophy or gets your ideology, right?
Yeah. Time to take a quick break, but there's more with Albertos Polizogopoulos when we come back.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larossemedia.com
And be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
Now, in that same vein, you know that the Trudeau government has promised to amend the Income Tax Act to ensure pro-life groups don't have charitable status, which could eventually affect churches as well if they also deem themselves to be pro-life. Given your experience in both of these areas, do you think that this will survive the courts? Where do you think this will go in Canada?
So I didn't think it would materialize. This was an election promise. And I thought it's not going to come. We're not going to see it. But then he went and sent a directive letter to the CRA. So I think we're going to see a policy change. I think it's less likely that existing charities will have their charitable status revoked on this basis. What's more likely to happen is new applications are going to be rejected. Will it survive charter scrutiny in the courts? I don't know. It's going to depend on the context. There is no freedom of conscience for organizations. There's freedom of religion for organizations. So if you're a Christian crisis pregnancy center, you have a better leg to stand on than if you're a secular one that's only hanging your hat on the pro-life philosophy. But if you're tied to a religious ideology or a religious belief, I think you've got a better shot. So my advice, without having anything specific or contextual, would be for new crisis pregnancy centers applying for charitable status to tie it to a religious practice.
Now, this is something that I've always talked about because it's my personal belief that these pro-life organizations or any type of non-for-profits in general should not depend on charitable tax status because it could be easily revoked. And it's basically a muzzle, like the government's paying you to shut up. And I think that a lot of people who are giving to these organizations are giving so because they believe in them and not necessarily because they're going to get 75% or whatever it is back. So I mean, do you think that these organizations and churches even should rely, given our secular government and the way the Liberals have gone and what could happen in the future, should they continue to rely on charitable tax status?
So that's a loaded question. I don't think they should rely on it. And I agree with you. If you're doing good work, people will donate to you whether they get a charitable tax receipt or not. So continue to do good work is the point there. That being said, if you can make it easier for people to give, you should. And one way to do that is to get charitable tax status. Now, I can tell you that I'm going to give to my church regardless of whether I get a tax receipt or not. And I'm going to give to organizations like yours, even though I don't get a tax receipt, because I believe in the work you're doing. But if I could get a tax receipt for the donations I make to right now, I'd welcome that tax receipt. And I don't necessarily see charitable tax status as a muzzle for pregnancy care centers because they're not necessarily engaged in political activity. And so there is no muzzle there.
But they're directly affected because they aren't, but then the government puts on bubble zone restrictions and they put on all these restrictions that are political, that they're being attacked for by the Liberals, by the NDP for provincial governments. And then if they speak out or try to defend themselves in any way, well, only 15% of what they can do can be political. So they basically can't do anything, can't stand up for themselves in any way, or they're scared to because that's how they interpret their charitable tax status. And being a political pro-life organization, we want these groups when the time comes to be engaged politically because it does directly affect them. And then they oftentimes say that they can't, citing that they're a charitable tax organization. So I totally understand giving and making it easier for people to give, but given the current political climate, I wonder if that's even plausible and that, all these organizations should be able to be involved politically and not be muzzled when the time comes and when they're being directly attacked. But
Right. Well,
Yeah.
like like you, I want these groups to be able to fight back, and I say that as the white Johnny Cochran for the It's also in my interest.
Can
for them
you
to fight
change
back.
that on your Twitter bio? Please?
Yeah, I'm off social media entirely, but if I still had Twitter, that might be my way. Somebody called me the John Stamos of constitutional negotiation, and that was my Twitter bio for a while. Yeah, so I agree with you, Alissa, that I want these groups to be able to fight back. And they can defend themselves. That's the one thing a lot of these groups don't necessarily recognize. If you're allowed to litigate. Litigation is not political activity. So those are two very different things.
Right.
It is a little bit frustrating because I remember when we first started Right Now, we were reaching out to different pro-life organizations, some with charitable tax numbers, some without charitable tax numbers, especially kind of just reaching out to say, hey, listen, like we have this person who is pro-life, who's running for a nomination for this political party in your area. It would be good to maybe let people know about them in different ways. And that does change. And it has to change for those that do have a charitable tax number with the Canada Revenue Agency and those that do not. But you still can get somewhat engaged in the political process if you have a charitable tax number. And I remember going through the Canada Revenue Agency's policy documents, their regulations to the Act, because of course you will know, Albertos, like there is the Act, which is huge enough as is. I can't remember if I have it on the back of... It's somewhere back there in my books. It's massive. It takes up like half the and that's the Income Tax Act from like 10 years ago when I was in school. So it's even larger then. But the regulations to the Act is even larger than the Act itself. And that's where the meat and potatoes come in. And when talking about like what charities can actually do politically, not politically, there is a lot that charities can do within their 10, 15, 20%, depending how much money they bring in, that they can do politically. And the pro-abortion charities, because you can go on the Canada Revenue Agency, you can see what they've done in terms of political activity. You can see how much money they've spent in political activity, how much money they've brought in from outside Canada. And for the pro-abortion charities, like the what's it called, Alissa? The Sexual Action something, the organization based in Ottawa. They have a charitable tax number. They brought in, I think, one year something like they spent $70,000 on political activity, brought in like $30,000 from the United States in a federal election year. So like obviously like they're doing stuff, and like they're doing it within the context of the law, I'm assuming at least. Yet on the pro-life side, like everyone's just scared. And they're not doing anything. And it's like, well, you can do stuff. You can't do what we do at Right Now, but there are things you can do. And look at your counterparts, your pro-abortion counterparts. They're certainly doing stuff. They're bringing in money from elsewhere. I'm not saying that pro-life charities in Canada have to go get money from, the United Kingdom, the United States, or anything like that. But it is a little bit frustrating that sacrosanct charitable tax number just absolutely freezes them as a deer in the headlight. That's not all of them, but it is a lot of them. Anyway, getting off my rant, one thing I wanted to ask you, Albertos, and then we can move on from this topic if you want, is like I agree with you. Like I think that the Liberals brought in this policy in the last election campaign because, they were turning around from Labor Day and they were trying to build toward that majority, and they were behind Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives at that point. And I think they just threw something out there of like 2 weeks left in an election campaign. Now it seems they kind of sort of want to pursue it. If they did pursue it, and let's say your assumption is correct in that only new applicants for charitable tax numbers are going to have issues getting that charitable tax number, do you think it will be specifically just to crisis pregnancy centers, or do you think it'll be more pervasive and it will be perhaps a new Christian community or even like a new Muslim mosque, or like do you think it'll get more broad than just specifically crisis pregnancy centers?
So I don't know the answer to that, but looking at how this government dealt with Canada Summer Jobs, I wouldn't be surprised if they took the opportunity to really expand the litmus test they want to impose for charitable tax status. So I don't see it going beyond the pro-life Christian community, just because of the nature of how this government targets the Christian and the pro-life community, but it certainly could. It opens the door to that.
Now, I wanted to ask you about Trinity Western because you were one of the lawyers on that case. And for those of you who don't know about this case, basically there's a Trinity Western University, which is in Langley, British Columbia. They wanted accreditation for their law school, but the Law Society of BC denied accreditation, citing their biblical view on sexuality and marriage. They took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld the decision to deny the accreditation, basically. What was it like, first of all, arguing before the Supreme Court?
Well, so that was I've been privileged to appear before the Supreme Court multiple times, so it wasn't a new experience for me, but it was. I think that's probably the most important religious freedom case in recent Canadian history. And we all knew it. There's like 35 lawyers in the courtroom for that case, and we all knew this was a very important case.
Yeah.
So that was grounding in a lot of ways and humbling in a lot of ways. But I'll tell you, I walked out of there thinking we were going to win, and it was a split decision. There were multiple sets of reasons. It was a 7-2 decision. 7 of the 9 judges ruled in favor of the law societies. 2 ruled in favor of Trinity Western. But even among the 7, there were differing reasons. There were 3 sets of reasons. And what was most interesting is the Chief Justice at the time, Beverly McLaughlin, had been on the panel in 2001 when Trinity Western went through this exact same case for its teachers college. And she ruled in Trinity Western's favor at that time. But this time she ruled against Trinity Western. So that was interesting. And there's a lot of theories as to why that happened, because she doesn't explain her shift. She doesn't justify her shift with law. She just changed her position. So, I mean, we all knew this was going to be a very serious case, one for the history books in terms of religious freedom law in Canada. And so that's very humbling in a lot of ways. And at the same time, nerve-wracking, because you know what's on the line.
Yeah.
Now, the advantage I had was I was on as for an intervener, so I acted for the Fellowship of Canada and Christian Higher Education Canada. And the nice thing about acting for an intervener in a case is you have the potential of winning the case for your side. You're unlikely to lose the case for your side. So the pressure is not as strong as when you're on for the actual party.
Right.
No, but I don't think that's super atypical of McLaughlin's court when she was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada, to see the Supreme Court of Canada basically overturn previous decisions that had ruled in very similar cases. Of course, for people out there, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, Albertos, but the Supreme Court of Canada isn't necessarily bound per se by previous rulings. Like lower courts are bound by the Supreme Court of Canada rulings unless you can distinguish the case, and distinguishment is always a very difficult thing to do. I think of Rodriguez, I believe was in 1993, and then you had Carter at the end of 2014. Very, very, very similar cases and completely different decision. I think, if I recall, Rodriguez was 9-0 as well, in favor of maintaining at that time the current laws against physician-assisted suicide in the criminal code. And then all of a sudden in 2014, it was flipped. It was a 9-0 decision, which is also very, very frustrating. I know we've talked about this in our podcast previously. These are, I think, at that time, no, because Brown wasn't on Carter yet. But I think a majority of those justices that ruled in Carter were appointed by the Stephen Harper government for the previous 8 years or whatever it was. So anyway, to me, I don't find that at all surprising that under McLaughlin, that all of a sudden, the way that she ruled and the court ruled in 2001 is completely different, 15 years later or whatever it was.
And I guess this also highlights the importance of getting involved in leadership races, because these leaders are the ones that actually appoint these justices. And, to have these flip-flops and these switches and then, these constant rulings against religious freedom is very telling and very important. And there is something, we can do about it as average Canadians. So, I just wanted to, that's what I was thinking as you're talking about a lot of these cases.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And on the Carter case, which was the assisted suicide case, 7 of the 9 judges were Stephen Harper appointees.
Yeah, there you go.
8 of the 9 judges were conservative appointees, because Beverly McLaughlin was appointed by Mulroney. And so, Stephen Harper, here's my knock against Stephen Harper. I don't know him. I've never met him. I voted conservative in the elections he ran. But So I just outed myself. Not that there was much ambiguity there. Here's my knock against Stephen Harper. So Stephen Harper had the capacity, because he appointed 7 of the 9 judges, he had the capacity to change his country for the next 100 years. Mm-hmm. And he was always accused of having a hidden agenda. And I think what he did was he appointed more centrist judges to avoid having that hidden agenda label really applied to him. And in doing so, we got decisions like Trinity Western and Carter and others. So there was another case as well, the Bedford decision, which came just prior to Carter, which was the prostitution decision.
Yeah,
was a complete reversal of the Supreme Court's prior decision on an exact same case. And I don't think McLaughlin was involved in the earlier versions of those 2 cases. But in Bedford, she explained that it's okay and appropriate for the Supreme Court to reverse itself if the constitutional context has changed. And in Carter, they went to great lengths to explain what changed between Rodriguez and Carter. They didn't do that in Trinity Western. And in fact, they said in the Trinity Western decision, the 2001 case is still good law. Well, that makes no sense. Nothing changed. What changed in the context of gay rights between 2001 and 2021 or whatever year it was? Mm-hmm. The pendulum swung way in favor of gay rights. Mm-hmm. And Trinity Western 2001 was decided in the midst of half a dozen decisions that brought Canada in a more progressive state with respect to gay rights. So there had been decisions that found same-sex couples who were not married should not be treated differently than married couples. There had been decisions that said Alberta's human rights code's failure to protect against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation was a violation of charter rights. And then there were a number of other cases as well that progressed LGBT human rights further. And Trinity Western was decided right in the midst of that series of half a dozen cases. So it's not like the Supreme Court was not alive to the issue of gay rights in Canada. Nothing changed in the last 20 years. If anything, it became more of a non-issue legally. So that's why I say it was surprising to see McLaughlin flip, because she didn't even try to explain why she flipped. Whereas in Carter, we don't know who wrote the decision in Carter, but the court went to great lengths to explain what had changed constitutionally, culturally, to justify their decision.
Now, you've argued before the Supreme Court, like you said, multiple times, and I mean, obviously you have colleagues in various law societies in the legal profession and whatnot, and and I'm not a lawyer. As a CPA, like when I was in public practice, we would deal with legal teams all the time, whether it be in audits or what have you. So like I have lots of friends in the legal profession myself. And I have some. I am friends with children of justices that sit on courts of appeal across Canada. I have friends of mine who have interned with courts of appeal and superior courts at the provincial level. It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's my understanding that your chief justice of a court, whether it be a court of appeal or the Supreme Court of Canada, can influence the rest of the bench in a certain way in research budgets and doling out work and things of this nature. And if that assumption is somewhat correct, do you think, as someone who's argued before the Supreme Court of Canada, that there will be a difference now that Richard Wagner is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada, or do you think it'll be a maintenance from the McLaughlin era?
So I don't know if those assumptions are right or not. I do know that at the trial level courts, the Chief Justice assigns or has the authority to assign judges to particular cases. So that's a way to influence or potentially influence the outcome. All judges on panels, whether it's a 3-judge panel at the Court of Appeal or a 9-judge panel at the Supreme Court, all judges have the ability to influence their fellow judges, because generally what happens is when the case is done, they go to a room and talk about the decision. Where are you leaning? Who's going to take the first stab at writing a decision? And so in that sense, they all have the ability of lobbying each other and trying to coax each other into a certain outcome. Now, I don't know if that happens or not, because I've never been part of those discussions. In terms of budgets, I have absolutely no idea, and I'm not going to speculate on it. But what was the last part of your question, Scott?
I guess if a chief justice can have that influence in a room, and maybe it's more of a personality thing than those other things, but if a chief justice can kind of shape the outcome on a panel on the court, do you think that there is going to be a difference under Richard Wagner as to chief justice versus Beverly McLaughlin, or do you think it'll be more or less a continuation of the same? I still think it's maybe a little bit early to see because he's only been the chief for what, maybe 2 years, if that.
I think I can speak to that very clearly because he's made it clear. So Chief Justice McLaughlin did not like dissent at the court. She wanted unanimous decisions whenever possible, and she encouraged unanimity among the court. He seems and has publicly said that he wants to see dissents. And we've seen a lot of dissenting reasons since he's been Chief Justice. And I don't think that's a bad thing because I think the future of the law, of the common law, often comes out of dissent. So we've seen, you referenced Justice Brown earlier, Justice Brown and Justice Cote often are on the dissenting side of the court. And they write scathing defense, and they did so in the Trinity Western case.
It's like Cote's day job. I don't ever. She's been part of the majority here. Very rarely is she.
Yeah, she's on the dissenting side quite a bit, and her and Justice Brown seem to agree on a lot of these more charter-specific cases. So I don't know if your audience is interested in reading decisions or not, but if you're going to read the Trinity Western decision, I would encourage you to pay close attention to Justice Brown and Justice Cote's dissenting reasons, because they don't pull their punches. They really let the other side have it on this.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So together they're very much our Antonin Scalia.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the U.S., were you surprised to see, I mean, I know that it was leaked prior, but were you surprised that they in fact did overturn Roe v. Wade? And did you actually think you would see it in your lifetime? Or from a legal perspective, did you think it was an untouchable piece of, an untouchable decision?
Well, to be fair, I don't pay that close attention to American case law. So I, like most of the pro-lifers in the world, I was surprised. I was encouraged by it. But I also, the day Donald Trump got elected, I remember sending an email to a bunch of people, and you guys may have been on that email chain, saying, could Donald Trump, because he had made a campaign promise that he would only nominate pro-lifers to the Supreme Court. And we knew that we were only 1 or 2 votes short. And I remember sending an email saying, could Donald Trump be the answer to the Roe v. Wade? And it turns out that he was.
Yeah.
So was I surprised? Yes, but not really, right? Because we had a good sense that some of his appointees would absolutely reverse Roe v. Wade. We weren't sure about Kavanaugh, but the other 2 I think were pretty clear. Gorsuch, what's her name?
Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah.
Yeah, ACB. See, what's interesting about that is, and this is what really gives me encouragement in Canada, but it also really explains like how much longer we have to go here in this country, and it doesn't have to be as long as our cousins down in the United States. Like it could be much shorter, but the list that he drew from was a specific list, not prepared by his campaign, but prepared by some pro-life organization or social conservative group in the United States. I forget the name of the list, but it's like, here is the menu of justices that we want to see appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States and some other benches, circuit courts or whatever. And when he made that announcement, he said, here are the 25 or whatever that I will draw from to put forward as nominees. And it was from that list. But for the pro-life movement in the United States to get to that point, to have those, because all these people I think were all mostly already justices, like they're already at lower courts. For the pro-life movement to get to that point, to have the timidity or the audaciousness to actually put out publicly, like, here's the list and this is our expectation, takes years of the pro-life movement getting involved in primaries, so their version of nominations down there, to get involved in making sure that pro-lifers hold positions in certain state legislatures and their federal legislatures, to make sure they have pro-lifers staffers that are working as political staff, to make sure they have pro-lifers going through law school and finishing law school. And in Canada, you have to wait 10 years generally. I don't know what it is in the United States, but all that work, like, it didn't just happen, right? It didn't just like Donald Trump won the nomination and all of a sudden there's these pro-life justices. The reason why there are pro-life justices when he won the nomination was because they held that much sway and they put that much work into it. that's something I would, not exactly that way per se, but that's something generally I would like to see in Canada, where the pro-life movement just takes it kind of to the next level and make sure that we are well represented on the court. Like we should have more than just two justices on the Supreme Court of Canada, arguing for us in dissent. I'm not saying it necessarily has to be majority pro-life, but certainly more than two, because that's not really representative of where the country's at, especially on things like sex-selective abortion, late-term abortion, and certainly on physician-assisted suicide. Now we're seeing all these articles coming out from all these newspapers saying like, well, this is awful what's happening. 21,000 physician-assisted suicides in the last 2 years, targeting people who have mental health issues, disabilities, things of this nature. So it's encouraging in that, yes, Roe v. Wade was overturned, but the way in which they got those justices appointed, I think, is also encouraging and should give us a little bit of a roadmap up here as well.
Also, Roe v. Wade is different, right? Because to overturn it, it means that you can implement more restrictive pro-life laws in different states. But here, the Supreme Court actually said for the federal government to implement the laws, which they haven't done. So it's not like we need to overturn Roe v. Morgenthaler to actually do that on a federal or provincial level, really. But yeah, I get your point on justices. Time to take a quick break. When we come back, Albertos Polizogopoulos will answer whether or not relevant and serious and not at all ridiculous laws are in fact true or false.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
On that note, Albertos, we have a new segment we want to do with you. It's called True or False.
True or false?
I know you have to go soon, but if you're up for it, we would like to end just at, you need to guess whether these obscure Canadian laws are either truthful or false. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So number one is, there is a local bylaw in Etobicoke that states bathtubs should not be filled with more than 3.5 inches of water. True or false?
It's so ridiculous it has to be true.
Correct.
Your legal instincts serve you well. Okay.
That is correct.
In Brantford, in Ontario, not far where I'm from, there is a local bylaw that you're not allowed to utter any negative phraseology against Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, that if it's not a law, it should be a law. So
Yeah, that's false. For the time being, at least. Yeah.
All right. It is illegal to transport liquor from one province to another without the permission of the province's Liquor Control Board, with the exception of wine.
I'm pretty sure there was a recent Supreme Court case on this, so I'm going to say true.
Correct.
Yeah. Free the beer. Eating ice cream on Bank Street in Ottawa on Sundays is against the law.
I think it's while walking backwards, but yeah, that when Alissa started with her first one, that's what came to my mind.
Okay.
So that's true.
Yeah, you're right. I think you're 4 for 4 so far.
You're
Yeah.
good.
No, I got the Wayne Gretzky one wrong.
On purpose. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. It is illegal to sell yellow-colored margarine in New Brunswick.
False.
It is false, but it is illegal in Ontario.
Really?
Yes.
Right.
I know this is something that you're new practice is going to get involved with. So this should be an easy one. There is an entire section of the Criminal Code of Canada devoted to oysters.
Oysters. I did not know that, but I'll say yes.
100%. That's true.
Yeah, and I love oysters. So if anybody else
6 for 6.
I think there was even something about slurping them too. I can't remember what I read, but it was very weird.
How else do you eat them?
But it was like specifically in there about
Has to be with a martini.
Yeah. Okay, having a home with more than 2 different colors of paint will earn you a fine in Beaconsfield, Quebec.
False.
True.
Oh, there you
Well,
go.
that's the first one. Yeah, we got you off your game now. It is illegal to scare the Prime Minister.
That's got to be true.
False. It's illegal to scare the monarch, but you can scare the Prime Minister all you want.
I guess it depends how you scare them.
Yeah.
It is illegal to put a scarecrow in your backyard in Charlottetown, PEI.
Again, this is so ridiculous. It can't be true.
It's false.
But Alissa wants it to be true.
Uh,
Okay, one last one
one.
here.
Yeah.
It is against the law to set fire to someone's wooden leg in Alberta.
Wouldn't what?
Leg.
Yeah, that's of course it is. That's assault.
Yeah, you got the last one right.
Yeah,
That's
that
pretty
is
good.
true.
I think you got like 70 or 80%.
You're a true lawyer.
That's right.
Well, Albertos, we really appreciate you coming on. We wish we had more time, so we'll have to get you back on another time. But thanks so much for coming on. Where can people find you? You said you're off social media, but the Acacia Group, if ever anybody needs legal advice, where can they find you?
Yeah, Acacia Group, all one word, .ca. So
Perfect.
www.acaciagroup.ca.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and have a good week. We'll talk to you soon. And please make sure that anyone who's listening subscribes to us on YouTube, on Rumble, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, basically anywhere you listen to podcasts. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss more awesome interviews like Albertos's. So thanks again, and we'll see you next week.
And Albertos, you'll get my email soon of all my complaints from Alissa and her harassment against me. So we'll file that case right away.
All right.
That's accurate. All right.
Okay. Bye for now.
Thanks, guys.